Hello, welcome to Books of Morgan, and I'm Morgan. Today I'm going to be talking about the top 5 books I read in 2019. It is now 2020 and I'm so excited for a new reading year. Last year I read a total of 107 books and I had to choose 5 for this video to talk about. So these books mean a lot to me since I read so many last year. And hopefully in 2020 I read just as many, if not more books. The first book I'm going to talk about today is a young adult contemporary. It's pretty hard-hitting and I'm sure you've seen this on many other people's top books of all time, but what I talk about today is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. There's a little bit of glare right there, sorry, but this follows a teenage girl on the south side of Chicago who witnesses one of her childhood friends get shot by a police officer, and it really goes through her experience with that. Talks a lot about race and class. Very hard-hitting, just a really wonderfully written book by Angie Thomas here. She also has another book called On the Come Up, but this was the first book that I read. I am severely late to the train on this one because it came out in 2016, but I really enjoyed this book and I think that everyone should read it. It's very accessible. The reading is pretty easy, but it's also very compelling and makes you think a lot in the end. So this is definitely in my top 5. The next book is historical fiction slash romance slash music and I think this is again on a lot of people's top 5, top 10 of the year, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is set in the 1970s and follows a band called Daisy Jones and the Six. It's told in interview format, so it's really different than other ways that books are read, and I know that throws a lot of people off. So if you're interested in reading this but don't want to read it in a different format, I've heard the audiobook is really good and has a full cast of characters. But yeah, this is basically a Fleetwood Mac retelling, and if you are reading this, you should listen to Rumors while you're reading it because I think it's so fun. But yeah, really good sex, drugs, rock and roll. It made me cry in the end, and I just really loved this book so much. And if you loved Almost Famous or are really into rock music, this is a good one to grab. Also, Taylor Jenkins Reid is a really great writer, and if you haven't already, you should also read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. The next book is another historical fiction book, but not as fun as sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This takes place during the 50s and 60s in North Carolina, in the swampy marsh area, and it follows a girl named Kaya who is ostracized by the community. A lot of people call her the marsh girl. Her entire family basically abandons her, so she's living off the marsh. She picks oysters and sells them at a gas station just to survive, but all along the time she's also categorizing marsh plant life and animal life and water and all this stuff. So she's basically a scientist, a biologist, and then there's a murder in the marsh and she is the prime suspect. So it follows her through the investigation, but it's just so beautiful, so lyrical. It's basically an ode to the South. It talks about race, class, all these really interesting subjects that you would think about in this time period, but it was so good. It took me a minute to get into it, but once I was 20-30 pages in, I was hooked and I read it in a single day. It was part of Reese Witherspoon's book club pick, and I actually tend to really like a lot of books that she picks for her book club, so this one really got to me this year. I really enjoyed this one, so good. Okay, the next one is actually nonfiction, which is very abnormal for me. I tend to really not gravitate towards nonfiction, but this one I pre-ordered. I was ready for it as soon as it was announced that it was going to be published, but it is called Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This follows Chanel Miller's life before, during, and after her rape trial with Brock Turner. So she was the survivor of Brock Turner, who was an athlete from Stanford University. She was at a party with her sister and she was found near like a dumpster, and yeah, it was really horrifying. And many of you know the results from that case were very disappointing because he was found guilty of rape but only sentenced to like 3 months of jail. So it goes a lot through like her trauma, her like her mental health, and it talks about like the judicial system in America and like how it is so unfair to women even when they have a solid case. It definitely took me a while to read this because it was so powerful, and I definitely think that this is not for everyone. It is very triggering because it does talk a lot about sexual assault and like sexual advocacy and like all this stuff. So I think it's a very important read, but if you are someone who knows that you'll get triggered by this, like definitely take time for yourself. I really prepared myself to read this because I don't like reading sexual assault stories very often because it does like trigger me, but this one I took it in like handfuls. Like I took breaks when reading it, but I still cried a lot when I read it. And I just think it's a really important story that people should read. Okay, and now we're down to the last book, and this one is very like sweet and cute and not like doesn't deal with like a lot of hard-hitting subjects, but I just enjoyed so much when I read, and that is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is a romance novel, but it is so freaking cute. It made me smile the entire time that I read it. Like I read it in one day. And it follows the two main characters, Emily and Simon. Emily is coming back to her hometown in Maryland. She's going to her hometown in Maryland to help her sister who was just in a car accident, who has like a broken leg, so she's helping out around the house. And her niece wants to join a Renaissance fair, but she can't join unless she has a parent do it with her, and since her mom is out of commission, so to speak, Emily takes that role, but she's not really passionate about being the like barmaid or like tavern wench, I think is what it's called. And Simon like runs the Renaissance fair, and it's like his whole life, but it's like enemies to lovers, so cute. It takes place in a Renaissance fair. I just think it's so nerdy and so sweet and dorky and cute, and like you should read it because it's really cute. And yeah, I love this one. It just puts a smile on my face. I'm actually thinking of rereading this already because it's just so fun to read. But yeah, those are the 5 books that I loved in 2019. I hope to read so many more great books in 2020. I had other 5-star reads that didn't make it to my top 5 but are equally as amazing and beautiful and great. But if you want to follow my reading throughout 2020, I will definitely link my Goodreads below so you can friend me. Also my Bookstagram, which is at the Books of Morgan, also going to be linked in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and tell me what you're thinking of reading in 2020 and what you're hopeful for. So thank you for watching. Bye.